welcome back. I'm so excited. I have a new guest today. Chris, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
And welcome back, Dan.
What's up? Thanks for having me back, Megan.
Yes. We are covering live events at Hurrdat, and I'm so excited for you guys to share. So there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, break it down for us, Chris. What happens before anything happens?
Mm-hmm. So event days are my favorite day. Like Dan and I have been in this industry quite a while. And there's just nothing like being at a live event for like 14 hours, like trying to tell a coherent story. And you know, when we talk to college students or like high school students about what we do, we always try to set realistic expectations because
they think it's so sexy. Like, hey, we're going to be at like front center row of
right.
Yeah.
And I always ask it, I'm like, hey, why do you want to be in sports marketing or why do you want to be in entertainment? And they're like, oh, I love going to concerts with my friends. I'm like, cool. You're going to hate this. Like
you're not going to be watching.
No, I mean, Maha, we, Dan and I aren't sitting and able to enjoy any of the bands. So we're thinking about 30 other things. Sweet Stock this last week. I mean, I didn't see a single song from a single artist the entire day just because we were running all day and have all these different responsibilities. So you really have to have a passion for telling a great story during an event. And I think that's where it starts, is just being in that mentality. Like, hey, I'm not here to enjoy this game or this event or this concert or whatever we're doing. You're there to, do the marketing and be support for the owners of the events or, whoever hired you to do so. And I think it goes way back. I mean, my first job, 22 years old at the time, and get flown out to New York and was doing tour managing for bands. This side of that, which we didn't really know was a job at the time, was doing social media marketing. And it was all about being on MySpace and connecting with the kids in the next city to get them to come out to your show. Because if you didn't do that, you weren't eating. So, I mean, this is almost 20 years ago that we're talking about doing social media marketing for bands. And, it really just kind of evolved over that time. And I've always had a passion for it. And mainly because I was always the first one to get the computer. Like this was back in the day of like computer labs, or like somebody had a computer in like their parents' house. Like I didn't have a cell phone at the time. Like we weren't able to just upload things via iPhone. So I always loved having the first priority on getting the computers. But I mean, that's really where it starts, is, hey, having a passion for telling a great story about the event that we're working.
And what do we do to help plan for the event or like rally the team?
So, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, yeah, dude, I mean, I start in a really different place. I mean, where it starts for me, like a lot of things, is desired outcome from the client or the film, or like, some of those things ring true. And so, and sometimes where we start depends on whether we're in year one or we're in year zero. Because what happens a lot of times is client needs to promote coming event. They want to, release a video asset in one form or another, broadcast spot, social spot, whatever. And then are like, oh, wait, this is year zero. Like we don't have any assets. What are we going to go? How are we going to do that? Or then, so then you go into it. And then we have done so many different, types of event work. And I, much like Chris, I came like way back in the day. I did 2 stints on the Vans Warped Tour. A lot of my work previous to this was doing action sports events. But every client is, it potentially is like a little bit different, of where, are we starting to create assets for the library for the next year? Or are we starting with like kind of how do we like buzz now, like promote of what's going on? And then, a lot of times it's both of those, and it's just you change the faders on how, maybe from year to year or from client to client. Like this summer was interesting. Like it was probably like our most events in one time period.
Mm-hmm.
We did 2 music festivals and the final stop of the Corn Ferry Tour, which is the PGA feeder system, through the Pinnacle Bank Championship. And like all 3 of those started in totally different places and had totally different agendas from one another. So probably like a lot of Hurrdat things, like it's not, you know, hey, let me go to the shelf and get you like event coverage. Oh, do you want like the supersized fries with your event coverage? Like it doesn't work like that. Everybody's got some different needs, and they're sort of all over the, you know, they're kind of all over the place, which is fun. It keeps it exciting.
Mm-hmm. I think you can, my philosophy on event coverage is we should always be doing 3 things. It's 1, selling tickets, 2, engaging fans, and 3, showing sponsor loves. Pretty much every activity that we have fits into one of those 3 categories.
Yeah, whether it's pre-planning or day of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit more about what happens. It's game day or go time or concert time. I know you guys are up bright and early, no matter what time the event starts. So walk me through a day.
So yeah, it usually starts the night before, where we're kind of game planning about what we're doing. Obviously it starts well beyond, but actually like getting ready for game day. We always want a cooler filled with Red Bulls and snacks.
You always want a cooler filled with Red Bull. Snacks.
Dan told me early in our career he's got a rule that I still live by, and that's feed yourself, feed the team. So making sure that you have things for the team members throughout the day, but really just game planning about what the entire day needs to look like. And generally, when you're working with client, they'll hand you a sheet of here's your must-haves, here's nice to haves, and then here's if you get bored, here's some things that you can do. So understanding what the client goals, because on those days, it rarely feels like we're a hired hand or like a contracted vendor. It very much feels like, and we've built these relationships over the years where it feels like we're part of the team. And that's how we prefer to exist in these relationships, where it's like, hey, you can count on us for pretty much anything. Like, here's our job, but if you need help, we're going to be there to help you out. And so identifying what those goals are and then figuring out the timeframes. And like Dan will probably tell you is, you know, you work backwards from desired result. Like, hey, we need to pop these 5 sponsors. They're brand new to the event. We want to make them feel really happy about their investment. And here's what they've been promised to by salespeople. You co-sign that, Dan?
Yeah, I think you make a really important point about sort of like popping sponsors, and, you know, it is really understanding. And I think so you also see like freelance folks jump in sometimes, and it's really interesting to see the difference in how some of that works in and I totally get it, because sometimes they're almost from a fan perspective on the idea that like, dude, oh my God, you know, Dave Grohl on stage right now is the most important thing that I need to be covering. And what you can lose in that, like Chris just mentioned, is like, you're a partner of the event. Like, you're like a surrogate to provide them in my area, you know, cinematic storytelling and cinematic assets. They have sponsors and partners of their own who have invested a lot of dollars to make these events happen. You need to be cognizant of trying to help take care of those things. Like, you become, and what's been really interesting and really fun as we've worked with some of these events year after year, it starts to see, you can see the wheels build again, at least on like the video and films end of, honestly, like, we create inventory assets. Like, we're not an expense. We're actually something for them to sell, because they can now either, like, this goes back to something we were doing like prior to Hurrdat, but, and it's just, you know, sometimes mentality is just really interesting, the way it's marketing, right? If I tell you you're a platinum sponsor of an action sports event and that costs $60K a year, but then for our 5 events, I want to charge you $3,000 for commercials to run on the webcast. A brand might feel nickeled and dimed, like, what the, oh, come on, I'm paying you this. But if at the beginning of the year you tell them, oh, it's 75 grand and you get all of this, and part of what you get is also these spots that run on their webcast, brands far less like, oh, okay, that seems fair. And then as a partner, we fall in the role of executing those kinds of things like that. So, you know, and then it becomes even like the next level almost after like year 3, 4, 5, like we start collaborating on what those opportunities are. Like that potentially is another part of like, to jump back to the lead in that informs the day of, and then of that, like, okay, well, we could produce this. And then they're like, oh my gosh, that would be awesome. Because like Chris mentioned earlier, we have a new sponsor XYZ, and we're not sure exactly where they fit in on some of like the other elements. So that stuff, other game day stuff for us in the films division. But actually it's the same when Chris overseeing social, which I know seems super basic, but it's really important and gets super messed up. Batteries are charged, cameras are available, media is clean, batteries are charged, because it will 1,000,000% happen where, and we speak from experience where, yeah, whatever, it's no big deal, I'm hardly shooting, oops, forgot to charge batteries. Event director comes over on the last day and is like, hey, still photographer, actually, okay, here's your day, we need like 90 shots, here you go. And it's like, oh, I'm out of battery. So yeah, it's just making sure like, taking care of those basics. We also try to get like a lay of the land. If we haven't been there before, like we try to get there early and kind of take a buzz around so we can kind of like even understand the function. So like we just did like 90s kind of music legacy artists festival, and you would think, where media partner, we should enter at where the VIP is. That'll be like easy for us. Well, actually, the way that this venue ended up laid it out, if we had done that, that would have absolutely been the farthest place possible from where we needed to go in. So just kind of figuring out some of that kind of stuff. And then, like Chris mentioned earlier, working backwards is super important in sort of a very practical sense where you're like, okay, if the DJ walks on stage at 2 and we need camera people in the photo pit, and then they need social people were at the door as people are clicking and coming in. Okay, you retro engineer that. All right, how long to get our passes? Like, okay, if we get our passes the night before, like you back out of that instead of just thinking about, well, doors open at 11. Okay, but if you need to actually be covering that, you need to be in position at 11. So what does it take you to get there?
Yeah. And I know sometimes you just mentioned like a lot of people that are actually on site, but we also have offsite team members sometimes that are helping because there's so much, like Wi-Fi, for example, like that you have to account for. Like, will we be able to drop that? Will we have mobile service, or is somebody physically going to have to run this from point A to point B? How are we going to get this? How's the team going to work and flex together throughout the day?
Yeah. From a social perspective, it's super handy to have somebody that is in a controlled environment, consistent Wi-Fi. They have a keyboard in front of them. They aren't trying to do things on the fly and like log into different accounts and everything. So from event perspective for social, love having somebody offsite, because then we can take assets, photos, videos, whatever, and then move those over to the person offsite. And they aren't, because especially when we walk a site earlier, we're like, oh my gosh, Wi-Fi is awesome. And then you jam 6,000 people into the area, be like, oh, our Wi-Fi is really not as good as we thought it was going to be. And most venues, they'll even set up, this last one, the festival that we did, we had a private Wi-Fi server that we were connecting to. Still wasn't strong enough. It was easier to do it over a cell phone.
And we're just in a lot of different environments too. What's really nice about the remote person on that social side, and sometimes we'll drop video assets to them too. Again, every festival's or every event, because it's not just music we do, is different. Sometimes you're not in a really secured place. So there's not a good space for somebody to pop up with their laptop, have power, have Wi-Fi, and be, uninhibited, like not having people around. Also, it helps, not having their faces melt with sweat dripping onto their laptop, because most of these are outdoors. Most of them are in the summertime.
Well,
Well,
some
yeah,
of
I
it is
mean,
hot too. I mean, you think about being around the cage for a fight that we're doing, and those lights are so bright, and you're just melting there. Your computers are melting.
someone's like what dripping sweat on you and like
Yeah, and
just
other
like
stuff.
in the drop zone there. Well, so day of obviously is a blur. And there's a lot of work to still be done after the event. So what happens after an event?
So for social, we always have a few days after the event that we're kind of controlling things too. and it's really helpful from in any of the events that we work with, they'll tell you the same thing. Like having dedicated social people is a huge blessing. Because a lot of times, a lot of these events, they've relied on themselves or like an intern or whatever that has 40 other jobs to be doing to be working on social. So having dedicated people that are only thinking about social has been super helpful. And generally that leaks a few days after the event. So we can, post any thank you assets, things that need to go out, do a little bit of community management afterwards, and then go into reporting to see how the event did. Especially these multi-year events, it's really good to see, okay, hey, we've been improving every year with our engagement, which what it should do on social.
Yeah.
If you see a dip, usually it means something's wrong. But going into reporting things like that, and then just preparing for the next year, figuring out what we can do and doing a little internal Monday morning quarterbacking for our team to say, okay, this went well. This is what we need to improve on. Here's the changes that we make for next year. But Dan obviously has a quite bigger workload post events.
I think it's interesting when you look at like videos set up when we're working with an event and then how it matches also with socials. It's like a bell curve. We're in the middle. So for films and video, I'd say it's typically like a I don't know, like a 4 or 5 on the run up. It's maybe like a 6 or 7 for covering the event. But then it's also like another 6 or 7 post, on a scale of 10 of like how intense we're going. Where like social is usually pretty low on the run up. They're super maximized doing tons of stuff during the event. And then they kind of pod down. But the thing you got to remember, like we now need to create something out of what we've shot. And that's also changed a little bit over the year. Like it's a really interesting, like symbiotic relationship with social and video. Because there was a time period, even in the trajectory of Hurrdat, where most of the social content coming out during the event was produced by like the films division. Like we're doing same day edits. I know we did like a really fun thing one year, like on Twitter, where for a MMA fight, where we basically told like a story, like throughout the day. Like we got each fighter as they arrived and like ... But like as equipment, i.e. phones, and then also like social platforms have gotten better and like limitations have changed and this kind of stuff like that. The things that social can handle in the moment have kind of moved over to them. And then we are taxed a lot with, I like to refer to it as like long lasting assets, both the video footage. And then we're typically creating like a really high quality, like wrap up video. So we also have like this after process, both in the whole event, but also by the day. I mean, and anybody in production knows, I mean, it's called dumping media. Like social gets to go home or the event gets to go home. Like, well, we have 6 cards that we need to back up, double back up, make redundancies, clean our cards so we can come back the next day. And then ultimately when the whole event is done, and we're so stoked, like we just expanded our team. We've got an assistant editor on board now, really good guy named Sam Brennan. And this is part of what assistant editors do is like, cool, time to log this. You need to transcode all that footage and then you need to log it so that you can find it of like what was day what, where's all the 98 degrees stuff, where's this fight, where's that fight, and then catalog that, because we're producing this wrap-up video, like it goes away. But like Chris was saying, when we start prepping for the next year and you cycle to the time that event wants to advertise, event 2021, event X in 2021 wants to advertise for 2022, we're getting a call back in March of it's like, okay, we need to maybe start thinking about our broadcast commercial. And we need to be able to access in a fast, concise manner, like the stuff that we shot the previous year. So it's really kind of an interesting, we coincide with social in the middle of the event, but they're probably like a little bit more, because they have to get stuff in the moment, right? Because it's like, hey, you have to show that gates open, like you have to show that like the merch stand is going off or that this venue, and like we get to be a little bit more cinematic and because we're doing post work, we're like, I don't know, the light's kind of not great here right now. Like we'll come back, or like we'll do it at like a different time. So there's just some like interesting little different differences, but like, yeah, our post event out is much heavier than the social teams.
Well, and then do you go back through and fill with like B-roll stuff too? So like like to your point, social is collecting and using assets, like basically as they're coming in, and you're cataloging it all out. So you can go back and say, oh, well, we like this story, but we didn't get that shot. So we're going to like handpick it. Maybe it was your story at night, but you're like handpicking a shot from the morning, like just a little cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing the whole, like you shoot both magic hours, and magic hour. You don't really know on film whether it's night or day as you get into some of that stuff. And again, you just sort of think about that. And our coverage has really evolved over time. I know, Chris had a really great thing that he said earlier about selling tickets, and which 9 times out of 10 is on the agenda for the event. And we try really hard not to lose sight of that, even in some of the more Monday morning quarterback-esque stuff. Like we've done some stuff where we look at client, and it's really cool, and it's really neat and rewarding when we're like, oh my God, did you see like how much, like we produced like a dozen like amazing 30 or 60 second, like high quality, cinematic, well-produced video clips throughout the tournament. Oh, that's great. But then when we're patting ourselves on the back, we don't do it for too long, because if you look at it and you go, oh, wait a minute. So 9 of those came out Sunday between like 11 in the morning and 1:30, the last day of a 4-day event. So Chris and I would kind of joke, we were like, oh, we just did garbage dump theater. Like that's not good, because you're not helping your client anymore. You're not helping the event, because at that point, how many people they've already made up their minds by, 11 o'clock on the Sunday of an event that's day 4 of 4 and ends at 5. Like you've lost, your tool can't help them. But yeah, so, again, that's part of our post-game process too, of it's like, hey, okay, we made some great stuff, but maybe we did it in a way that wasn't as helpful as it could be. How do we take what we're doing, and for next year, like, let's move it around. Hey, what if we produce more of those things in advance for you? Would that help, sell more tickets, get more sponsors so that you can continue your event? So that's kind of part of the aftermath as well.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I think, back to selling tickets, like it's telling that story to either create nostalgia for like, hey, we went to this last year, I'm so excited for it this year. Or it's that FOMO, like, I can't believe we missed out on that. Look at how awesome this was. Like, I'm pumped to go this year. So, yeah, you guys do an awesome job. 2 different worlds, but they come together on game day. So
yeah, they sure do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. I really appreciate your expertise again. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. We have new episodes coming out every other Wednesday. So thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Dan.
Later, guys.
I've Heard That is a part of the Hurrdat Media Network. For more information, follow Hurrdat on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram, or visit hurrdatmarketing.com.
A Hurrdat Media Production.